I'll just give an official intro and then we get going. So welcome everyone to another 100 Days of No Code workshop. Really good to see you all as always. We're joined by Andrew Davison, who is a automation expert, particularly in Integromat and Zapier, and I'm sure many others. But he's going to be talking us through how to get started in these tools and then answering some of your questions at the end. But yeah, it's a very loose format, Andrew, so very happy for you to play it as you'd like to, as you want to. So yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Andrew, and really excited for this. Thanks for coming.
Perfect. Yeah, so I've got a presentation. It's sort of geared towards people who sort of don't know too much about Zapier and Integromat. So for some of you, it might be covered ground. But you can ask me a bunch of questions, more technical at the end. And so, yeah, geared towards more people sort of using these tools for their businesses or places they work. But a lot of this, it can be sort of applicable to people who are building no-code products. So I think I can share a screen. So I'll fire up here. Hopefully you can see my Google Slides presentation now.
Yes, perfect.
Cool,
perfect.
and I will now hit present mode. So, perfect. Okay, so yeah, improving your operations with automation using tools like Zapier and Integromat. First off, who am I? I'm Andrew. So I've used Zapier now for almost 5 years, Integromat for about 3. And right now I'm running an agency called Luhu. We're one of Zapier's top-rated partners, and we're in the Integromat partner team as well, and slowly getting involved in other automation tools like N8N and Parabola. So that list will hopefully expand soon. For people who want to catch up with me after this talk, you probably have all seen me on Twitter. I'm quite active there, answering questions and shouting out and talking about automation. So just come find me on there. So for those who don't know, what is Zapier? What is Integromat? In a nutshell, it's move this out of the way. In a nutshell, they're automation tools that allow you to create workflows that help your tools and software communicate among themselves and pass data between themselves. And that should make your business life easier. So they're all based on the sort of principle that when something happens in one app, a trigger, something should happen in one or more other apps, an action. This is done via triggers, searches, and actions. And the way Zapier works is it's constant working in the background, waiting for new events to happen. Either it's polling apps it's connected to every few minutes, looking for new events, new data, or it's waiting to receive data from apps. So the great thing is, these tools run 24/7, whether you're asleep or not. So they can be a nice, good, solid backbone to your business. And yeah, obviously triggers and actions, and then you can use searches to find the data that you're updating. So you can create data and update data and records in these apps. And then you can use filters and formatters just to make your workflows, more useful, more powerful, deal with different scenarios and situations. How many apps are we talking? So I think at the moment, Zapier has something like 3,000 apps connected, and that's growing literally by, 50 to 100 a month at the moment. Typically, apps are building their own integrations on Zapier. Zapier aren't really building too many these days, except for some of the, really popular core apps. Integromat, not so many. They've got 500. But one thing to say, if you're considering Zapier and Integromat, chances are if you're using any sort of major app, like for example, the ones here, they're covered on both platforms. Zapier is kind of good if you've got, a niche app in your stack and it's not covered on Integromat, it could be on Zapier. Integromat tends to be a little bit deeper with some of their integrations. So I found some of their integrations, for example, GitHub might have dozens of actions and triggers and searches, whereas Zapier might only have a handful. So I think Integromat goes quite deep. Zapier tends to go quite wide. But really, it doesn't matter in terms of picking which one works for you. So I'll just sort of show a very basic example of a Zap. I'll come over to here. So this is just a really basic one here. The trigger here is a new video in a YouTube channel. And in this case, it was configured to a channel ID. And I think this is the Zapier channel on YouTube. And then there is a formatting step in here that's basically taking the title of the video. And because on my, oh, this was my YouTube channel, sorry, because my titles on YouTube have my company name and then a spacer and then the name of the video. I'm using a formatting step here to basically remove that name section. And then what I'm doing is just creating a record in Airtable. I have a marketing Airtable set up where I just record the title of the video, a link to the video. So that's just a good example of the sorts of automations you can build with Zapier that can be helpful. That's the sort of task. It wouldn't take too many minutes to do that manually. But if you were a channel sort of publishing, 1, 2, 3 videos a day, you can sort of see how, a few minutes saved here and there can start to really add up. So that's an example of one in Zapier. And then quite similarly in Tegromat, I realized Twitter I was missing basically DMs getting sent to me in Twitter. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make sure I get back to people. And it turns out Zapier's Twitter integration doesn't have a trigger for new DMs. So Integromat was the solution for this one. And then I've just built here a simple automation that watches for new messages. It checks every half an hour, but I could have scheduled that as short as every 5 minutes. When I get a message, it gets the corresponding user, gets their biographical information. And then what it does here is it just sends me an email. And this is a good example of what you can do when you're building steps in an automation. This action step here is sending me an email. And what I'm doing here is some of the template is hard typed, but what I'm using is I'm using variable pieces of data from the trigger and from that search step to basically, make this unique, adding the name of the person, the screen name of the person, the text of the message. And then I worked out the format for the URL that will then allow me to open that message directly. So I can click now and go straight to the right message. So yeah, that's a good example of Integromat here. Let's go back to the presentation. So what does this mean for your business? Or, if you're building a no-code project, what does this mean? Well, I tell clients there's 3 ways that automation can add real measurable value to your business. First, that's obvious, the saving of time, staffing costs. Anyone who's been in a business where there's paperwork and admin work to do, you know how time consuming it is, and automation is one of the ways to eliminate that. Another thing that it can do is help you increase the volume of output. I see this particularly with e-commerce businesses. If you're getting in orders and there's several steps after the order, you've got to, do stuff. You've got to create an invoice. You've got to send information to whoever's distributing. You've got to create packing slips. There's lots of steps to do. Sending messages to customers to keep them updated. That's the sort of thing where, even with staff, you can handle a certain amount of orders. But if those start to come in, more and more, there's a point where you just wouldn't be able to keep up. The good thing about automation is once you build these workflows, they can handle 1 order, 10 orders, even 100 orders, an hour. There's exponential room for growth. So it means that your business can do more. And finally, avoiding costly mistakes. I find this with some professional services companies I work with. So like lawyers, estate agents, stuff like that. They're getting new customers in, they're filling in forms on websites or even sending emails in. And then they're having to add them in CRM, they're having to add them in their email marketing apps, they might have to add them in the bookkeeping app. And every so often mistakes are going to happen. Email addresses will get put in wrong, names will get put in incorrectly. And depending on what sort of industry you're in, that could be a problem. Anything from just, an annoyed customer who misses an update right through to some sort of regulatory issue. So the good thing about a workflow is, once it's constructed, that data going between apps is going to go exactly the same. So you can be sure, nothing's going to go wrong. So case study here. These are real clients I've worked with. So Reclaims UK, they were a company that helped veterans claim back refunds from the UK government when they've overpaid their income tax. And they are using a CRM. And what they know, a lot of the communication they do with their customers is by SMS. And what they were literally doing is that they had a few staff with phone numbers and they were literally manually SMSing their customers and then noting in the CRM, what they'd said, waiting for a reply, putting details into their CRM. And that was just becoming problematic. So what they wanted is a solution where they could both see messages sent and messages received within the CRM. So they were using Monday.com. And what we did to solve this problem was we set them up on Twilio, which is a service where you can basically rent a phone number and programmatically send and receive SMSs. So we set up an automation that essentially the Monday CRM has the phone numbers of customers. So when an SMS comes in via Twilio, it will look up the phone number it's received from, find the corresponding record in Monday, and then put a copy of the text of the message as a note on the CRM. And then they took that further. They wanted to be able to reply to those messages without having to get a phone out. So what we did is built another workflow that allowed them to then add a note in the CRM against that customer. And then Zapier would look up the corresponding customer's phone number and then send them an SMS via Twilio. So they were able to have full-on conversations via SMS without leaving the CRM, which was great for them. And another thing they wanted to do, part of the process, they receive these tax refunds from the government into their bank account and then need to distribute them to these customers. And again, they were doing this manually. So they would work out what the customer was owed back. That detail would be in their CRM. Then they would have to log into their online banking, go back, get the customer's bank details, put that in, put the amount in, and then action the transfer. And not only was that taking time, because they were, actioning sometimes 20, 30, transfers a week, they were also finding mistakes were getting made. So account details were being put in wrong, the wrong amounts were getting sent. So we looked for a bank that had a Zapier integration, and it was pretty difficult to find one that even had an API that we could use, but we did find a service called TransferWise, which is basically a pseudo bank. So the customer was able to set up an account within TransferWise, and then TransferWise allows you to send transfers to other bank accounts. And they have an API. So what we did is we actually built a custom Zapier integration for that, so that we could then add TransferWise into a workflow like we would any other app on Zapier. And then we set up a process. So now by clicking a status update in their CRM, they can action a bank transfer. So once they click that status update, pay customer, it looks up the amount that they're owed. It takes their bank detail. It goes over to TransferWise. It creates a recipient if they don't exist in there already, and then it actions the bank transfer. So now at a click of a button, they can have their customers paid, and that's great. And so they estimated that with those two things alone, they're now saving 20 hours of working time each week. So that's great for them. Similarly, another customer of ours, Squiggle. So what they do is they help people, hang on. So they help people essentially create wills. And they were finding a lot of problems onboarding clients. Again, it was taking time. And the problem is they were receiving their leads from a legal services guild that essentially would send these customer detail sheets by PDF. We tried to find if there was a way that they could send it in any more modern way, even filling in a web form or something, but no, these needed to be by PDF. So essentially, we created a workflow that triggers when a PDF is dropped into a OneDrive folder. It then passes that PDF using an app called DocParser. And then what it does is it creates a record in their CRM capsule and also creates a record in their bookkeeping app, because the customers then need to receive an invoice through Xero. So that was a big help for them. Similarly, it saved about 35 hours a week from inputting clients manually, and mistakes were avoided as well. And then finally, I thought I would show you just an example of a workflow I built for myself. So I think quite a few of you probably have seen me on Twitter answering questions about Zapier, answering questions about Integromat, and might be wondering how I managed to keep up with it. Well, I don't spend all day in Twitter, luckily. What I've done is I've set up a Zapier, and the trigger is whenever there's a new tweet that has the word Zapier in or the username Zapier in. I then added a code step that basically counts the number of other username tags are in that tweet, because I noticed that reply chains end up with a lot of usernames in, and I want to filter those. So I added a little code step there to do that. And then there's some other filters here. For example, I wanted to make sure the tweet wasn't sent by Zapier or me or my agency, that the language was English, that there weren't too many other username mentions in there, that it wasn't a retweet. and there's a couple of other filters here I can't remember, but they were essentially added just to stop useless tweets coming through. At this point, it then finds or creates a record of that tweet in an Airtable I've set up with all the details about the tweet, the author, the bio of the author, and a link to it. So that every morning now I just pop into an Airtable of tweets about Zapier and I can jump in and get involved in the good conversations there. And then I wanted to take it a bit further. I realized, if people are asking questions about Zapier, that's probably a great opportunity for me to try and win some business by answering that question quickly. So I have an extra filter here now at the end of it that essentially looks for a question mark. And if there is one, then it sends me an email with a link to that tweet. So I get it straight away and I can go in and answer. So that's sort of a bit of an introduction to Zapier and Integromat. And in terms of, starting to use it in your projects, or if you're in a company and you want to use it there, people ask me, how can I get started? And I just have a few tips really. Firstly, it's definitely best to have someone, in your team take charge. They should definitely be someone who's focused on the operations of your project or company, and a constant learner, because, it's going to be a learning curve. And it needs to be somebody who knows how the business is running so that they can keep in mind what can be automated. Put aside 6 to 12 months for this, both to learn, how to use a tool like Zapier or Integromat, to learn about automation in general, and to sort of slowly develop and automate stuff in phases. Don't try and automate everything. I think it can be quite addictive, Zapier and Integromat, and it can get quite exciting when you find a new thing you can automate. But sometimes you'll find, and I've definitely found this, you might, spend 2-3 hours working out how to automate a process, sit back and realize it was something that's only, saving you 5 minutes a week. And, depending on how deep you want to go into this, it might not be worth it. And it's definitely worth keeping in mind that just some processes still are just easier to be done manually. Understand that shifts like this can be disorientating. If you've already got a project set up and processes set up, if your things are running smoothly, pulling the rug out and automating a process that it can break things. It can be hard to understand. Things can get missed, and that can, demotivate you. So again, that just goes back to don't do it all at once. Do it in phases so that you can get used to automating and how that looks for your company. And expect issues, so have backups and fallbacks. Zapier does break from time to time. The apps it's connected to do break from time to time. And sometimes, things change. An app updates its API, it causes a knock-on problem. So definitely, make sure data is stored somewhere. You have backups. You have the ability to switch and do stuff manually at a pinch if you need to. How to plan and what to automate. I think it's pretty simple. What I tell my clients is just sit down, think about your project or your business. What are you doing manually right now? And just start writing those processes down. Think about how long they take, and try and identify the ones that will be, most meaningful. And go by department or area of your business. So, maybe you're going to sit and, if invoicing and billing is the most, torturous part of your business right now, think about fixing that before you start, worrying about customer services or onboarding. Go where you're going to get the most gain. And test several tools. So, I've shown you Zapier and Integromat, but, investigate other tools there. There's so many no-code tools out there, both in the automation space and in the parallel spaces. And it might turn out that what you need to do is actually better done by another tool. And in that case, definitely use that. Don't find a way to use Zapier if other tools are better. Choosing between Zapier and Integromat, I think for most people, it's a personal preference. Integromat has a very different UI to Zapier. It's much more visual. When you design flows, you're designing horizontally. With Zapier, you're designing vertically, and it's much more about configuring each step on a control panel. With Integromat, it's more visual. So there's that to consider. Zapier goes broad, as I said. Integromat goes deep. So that's a case of working out what apps you need to integrate and working out the best tool. And not being afraid to maybe use both. They are quite cheap. So using both is fine. I do myself. Pricing, as I say, both tools, priced by task. Integromat is a lot cheaper. So if your processes, if your workflows are going to have 5, 10, 20 steps in them, then it's really worth considering whether to do it in Integromat to save money. If your workflows are pretty simple, Zapier is probably easier to learn and quicker to get started with. And just a little plug now for me, knowing when to work with an expert. So I expect most people here are probably quite DIY orientated. So you're probably going to try and build yourself before working for an expert. But if you don't have the time to learn or to really see the process through, if you're having trouble working out what you can automate, or if you've started but you're hitting errors, that could be a good time to give someone like me a call, so I can help you get past those steps. And how if you've succeeded? Well, it's pretty obvious. If your processes are automated and things are running smoothly and it's saving you time and it's saving you energy, and your business is growing, then that's typically a good sign. Don't worry too much about metrics like how many tasks did Zapier do for you last month or anything like that, because they're vanity really. It's very subjective. I just look at time saved. I go back to that shopping list I wrote. Have I saved time? Has it been worth it compared to how long it took me to build? And then, yeah, that's it. If you need some more help, as I said, I'm on Twitter. There's my email address there if you want to. I'm happy to answer questions and look at stuff all day long. So please email me anything if you don't have a chance to ask a question today. And I have set up a Zapier Mentoring Club. It's a monthly thing. You get access to a Slack group where I can spend all day Q&Aing with you. And I'm also sharing in there tips and tutorials and spotlights on different features that Zapier put live. So if anyone wants to get in on that, there's the details. And that's it. So I'm happy to start taking some questions.
Thanks so much, Andrew. That was great. Yeah, kind of opened my eyes to some other use cases for Zapier, so I really appreciate that. But yeah, maybe it's best if we stop sharing screen, and then then we can just so we can see everyone.
Perfect. There you go.
Awesome. Hello. So yeah, I think let's just open it up for questions. It's a pretty intimate group, so if you've got a question, just come off mute and ask away.
Yeah, I'll jump in first then. Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. Really helpful. You've helped me out on Twitter quite a lot as well, so I appreciate that. Just one of the questions about building your business. So I'm doing automations for companies and things using Zapier mainly, but Integromat, slowly coming along. But I just wondered, what are some of the lessons that you learned when building your business and building automations for clients, and what are some of the problems that you've solved and wish you'd known a bit earlier or something like that? Just some tips you can give to get over the pain, the pain of some of the problems you come across. Sorry.
Yeah, I think definitely I've always been blessed by sort of first thing having all inbound work. So I've never had to think about how to first pitch for new business. I've never had to think about, how would I explain automation tools to a customer who's never heard of anything like it. So I think that's one thing. With something like automation, if you can, set up a flow so that people are coming to you with specific problems, or people have come to you having discovered Zapier already and now need some help. And I'd say there is plenty of that work available. I got my start on Upwork and Fiverr, and that was sort of a good training ground. The projects were quite small, the projects were defined. I didn't have to worry about, setting up an infrastructure. By the time I did get around to starting my business and doing all the sort of build a business stuff, I had a guaranteed, inflow of work there. So that was useful. Yeah, try and find ways to get work in before you start building a business around it. I think definitely something I've always faced is, and I've had this debate with other experts, is should you stay broad or should you go niche? Should you say, I'm going to be the go-to for lawyers that want to automate? And I guess the advantage there is, there's a handful of tools there that 90% of them are going to want to use. And you can get really good at using those tools and knowing exactly what workflows want, build around those. but that closes you off to work, and you have to constantly be in that stream of work. Whereas I've chosen to go broad, and I try to take on work in any industry with pretty much any app, whether or not I've actually used it before. I try to focus on just being a problem solver in Zapier. That's been good. That's mean plenty of work, but it has led to situations where, maybe I've taken on a project thinking I'd be able to get my head around it. And I found out, one of the apps involved has a particular quirk, or, it's very different than another app in that it's a different type of CRM. And that's led me down into projects where it's been tough to deliver, or it's taken a lot longer to deliver. What else? I guess another area is pricing as well, how to get pricing right. So I charge by the hour. I know some people charge per project. And there's a sort of ongoing debate about whether you should charge by project, a fixed price based on what you're developing, or whether that's difficult to do because some of these projects have such a huge scope, and whether hourly is better because you can simply charge for how long it takes you. But then again, you're limiting your income. So I think work out what your niche is, or whether you're going to go broad, and then work out your pricing and do that pretty early to save yourself the headache of trying to flit around as you grow. I probably could have invested more time in thinking about that. But when I was growing, I was sort of just taking any work at any price, whatever they would pay, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing now, and I'm finding those problems. So if you go broad, then there's so much to learn, and then everything you learn may not be transferable to the next job you do. And then so trying to price a project is difficult because you come up against hidden, unknown things that will just bite you, right? So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's useful. So, and then just one more quick question. I know you're not working for Zapier, but you have access to Zapier, and I was just wondering about the certifications to the expert. So I know that's been going on for a while, and just wondered if there's any information about when that will be available to try and do.
Yeah, for sure. So basically they closed it last year, as you probably all saw. There's a guy called Greg who's basically now the partner manager in charge of the experts program. And basically what he said is, he's for the next probably 3 to 6 months, he's working with the ones that he's already got to really get that program developed around us. I think the plan is to reopen the certification program, within the next 3 to 6 months. I know they are in the process of hiring somebody in Zapier whose sole job will be to deal with onboarding and certifying new experts. And they will also be designing that process. So in terms of what exam there'll be, or what qualifications there'll be, it's sort of to be decided. If you go onto the experts page on the Zapier website, and that's experts.zapier.com, at the top left there, kind of buried, there's a little link that says, want to be an expert, join the waiting list. So click there, add your name. I do know that Greg is reaching out to some people just to have chats with people, preliminary chats, and he's on Twitter as well. So, if you're sort of already in business and have got clients, I think reach out to him, let him know. So when he does on board, he's probably going to come speak to those people who are most proactive about it.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks.
Who's next? I know, Luke, you normally have a few questions up your sleeve.
Yeah, I do. Thank you very much, Andrew. It's good to finally meet you sort of
Likewise,
in person. Yeah. So I've been wondering, what are your thoughts on the no-code versus automation landscape? The tools are, new tools are coming out nearly every day. Many tools in the automation space as well. We're seeing more and more niche or specific tools. And I'm wondering what your thoughts on the entire landscape is. Do you think it would be wise to focus on learning Zapier and Integromat, or heading out and becoming a certified expert for a different tool, for example?
Yeah, I guess I'm totally biased. I'm Zapier all the way now, and I think I'm too deep now to really go and learn Bubble or go and learn another one of these tools. And I really I advocate that there's just so much opportunity for people who are competent in an automation tool to find work and get paid for it. It's definitely worth it. I think what's interesting is, it's a no-code tool. I'm most active in the no-code community, but most of my clients don't really, that's not a concept they're really familiar with. A lot of clients I'm working with are just seeing Zapier as a way to solve this specific problem. So whereas, if you are going to work in the automation space, you're going to be talking to a lot of no coders, and you can definitely build nice projects and have Zapier be a useful part of your no code stack and be, a way to get projects out the door and running on really low, resource amounts. But if you're going to do it professionally and get paid for it, chances are you'll be working with people who've not heard of no code, don't work with these other tools. You're unlikely to be selling your services to other people building no code projects, because typically those people want to learn no code and use these tools themselves. So,
thank you. And have you heard about Zapier Labs, or the Maker product that they're working on?
Yes, it's really, I'm in their test group, although I haven't really had a chance to play with it. And I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, but essentially that's interesting, because it seems that they're going to take the infrastructure of, being able to automate, connect different apps together, and they're going to allow you to build apps on top of it and then sell access to those apps for money. So I know that I think they're going to have some example apps going live in the next few months. So it'd be interesting to see. And that, to be honest, that could actually open up a new route for people who are in the no-code space, who maybe don't want to get into consulting, because consulting can be a bit dry and hard work at times. People with no-code skills and Zapier skills can now think about just building apps and marketing those, like they're building apps on tools like Bubble and Glide, and and I know Zapier are keen to try and capture the no-code market, and I think this is the tool they're going to try with.
What was the name of that tool? Sorry, I missed that.
So they're basically, Zapier have got this thing called the Maker project, and I'll put the link up, or I'll send you the link and you can send it out to people, because I think they're still accepting people onto it. But basically, it's like a scripting language and a sort of an app building platform that basically leverages the Zapier engine and lets you build apps. So, for example, maybe you wanted to build an app that sort of like a Zapier workflow, but outside of Zapier, so that people would just see your app, and maybe the app is they can connect their Facebook lead ads account, and then they can select what their CRM is. And then the app is just, it will put leads from Facebook into their CRM of choice. And instead of them setting up a Zap to do that, they're just configuring it in this sort of white label app. And behind the scenes, it's essentially a Zap under the hood.
Interesting. Thanks for that.
Cool. Who else has got some questions for Andrew? Yeah, just says come off mute.
If anyone wants to bounce ideas for insanely difficult, complex Zaps, I can also do that. That can be fun.
Hi Andrew, thanks very much for the talk there. How do you manage scope creep with the projects you get, rather with your clients probably being limited in terms of their understanding for what can be done? They might have certain expectations, and then as you are revealing what you've done to them, they'll be trying to broaden their their horizons with you. How do you, with your experience, how do you manage to deal with that?
Yeah, it's a constant battle. To be honest, even after doing this 3-4 years now, it's still a problem. It's part of the reason why I've always chosen to do hourly, because I've quickly realized it's very hard. If you're building a website, you can say, $2,000, you'll get a website with 5 pages and a contact form. But, you can't say, for $2,000, I'll automate your business, because it doesn't work like that. It's so subjective. You can't even say, $2,000, I'll build you a workflow that takes your new leads and puts them in a CRM, because you just don't know what apps are on either side of that and what nuances the business will have. So it's part of the reason I've charged hourly, because then I can say, right, tell me about what you need doing. Okay, that's going to take me 5 hours. And I'll definitely be conservative with that estimate, because I'll know that the client will have questions, that they'll want to have things explained. I know for a fact that there'll be some things they've forgotten. So having an hourly, I found, does kind of help that process, because if they do sort of bring something new in, I can say, well, look, I can do it, but it's going to add 2 hours. Is that worth, is that going to save you enough time and money to be worth it? Of course, that limits you. And I've always tried to explore it. And I've always had some people say, the better way would be to look at, what type of business it is and think about how much value your workflow is going to deliver for that business and price accordingly like that. But then you're taking a bet, because if you're fixed pricing it and promising a certain deliverable, if you find out you've misjudged it, which can happen quite often, you could well end up losing a lot of time and money on that. So
do you agree a specification of what you're going to deliver, with a prescribed sort of number of tasks or a result that you can then compare to, so someone's asking you to do something a bit more, and you can then legitimately say, well, this is a different thing, hence I'm going to have to.
Yeah, no, I yeah, absolutely. So yeah, usually a client will come in and it's either going to be, I want to specifically do this, I want this, and this to happen. And that's easier because I can say, right, that's going to take 2 hours. This is the price. If a client comes in and says, I'm an estate agent, I'm using this app for, the form on my website, and I have this CRM, or when I use this app for my bookkeeping, I'll go, right, okay, and what processes make up your business? And either on a phone call or by email, I'll sort of tease out of them, when a customer fills in a form, I want them added to my CRM, I want them to get an SMS, I want, them to be sent a Calendly link. If they book a meeting, I want, them to get an email and to be added to my, bookkeeping app and have an invoice sent. And then that's great, because then I've got, 5 or 6 bullet points there. And I'll go, right, that's 6 hours there. And the results will be a workflow that does that, and does that. And then, yeah, like you say, it's great. At the end, I can say, here's your workflows to do that, and that. If they come to me and say, oh, I didn't think, but can I also, I say, right, well, that's another bullet point. Do you want me to do that now? Or, should we put that on a phase 2? Should we, look at some other things that come out of this, work with what we've built here, get that bedded in your business, and then work on phase 2. Because that's another thing with scope creep. It can be a problem for me, but it can be a problem for these businesses. As I said, if they try to do too much at once, I find it can go wrong, because something goes wrong, they suddenly lose trust in automation. They suddenly worry, if that went wrong, is the whole thing going wrong? Am I losing clients here? Actually, I want to abandon this process. So
that trust is a good point, and leads me on to what I was thinking about. How do you manage their accounts? They've obviously got logins and passwords. Mm-hmm. They entrust you with that to then, get the Zap working and tested, and then what? Or do you have to hand hold them to, link it all up?
Yeah, essentially they have to share passwords. Zapier haven't made it too easy so far to really. There's their team access, but you still have to put Zaps into shared folders to work with. They're actually working on a new way to let clients authenticate experts without sharing details. But for now, yeah, I have a big Trello board with a card for each client and their Zapier login details. And if they change them from between times working for them, I have to get them. And yeah, they do have to put quite a bit of trust in me. It's not great. But yeah, build everything in the client's account. And, yeah, a lot of clients are more than happy to sort of say, here's the keys. I don't want to know too much about how this is working under the hood. Just make it work and manage it for me. And if there's errors, get in there and fix them. Some of my clients are a bit more, I think some clients, maybe 10%, see what I'm building, go into Zapier, start looking around and get kind of excited and go, oh, this is cool. Actually, I'm going to learn how to do this. And they might call me up in 3 months and say, oh, actually, I fiddled with your Zaps a bit and now something's broken. Can you? But that's fine. I kind of like that, though. It's nice to see people getting excited about Zapier. And I can usually say, oh, you were pretty close. Just change this and that. And I'll record them a little video. And that's actually quite nice as well.
Lovely. And just one final question, if I might, because it's quite frank. But do you get a deposit? Do you have some money up front from new clients?
I basically try and get everything up front. I mean, so most anything under 5 hours, I usually get them to pay up front, and almost all of them do. Anything above 5 hours, yeah, I'd probably say, right, I'll pay the first 5 hours now. Once we've used that up, I'll bill you for the next chunk of time.
I'm glad that's been seen as a precedent now. So you can we'll follow your lead. I think that's a great piece of.
Oh yeah, never, because And particularly where it can be difficult is when you built a project and the clients go, you know, something might go wrong, or can you just change this? So when a project's over, I usually say to a client, look, you know, pay me an hour or pay me 2 hours, and, you know, I'll use against that if there's little tweaks that need doing over the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, you know, if there is a problem, I'm going to have to wait. You're going to have to send you an invoice. You're going to have to pay me before I'm going to go in there and fix that. So yeah, I usually build a project and try and take a couple of hours to keep in the bank.
Right.
That's been useful, very useful.
Excellent. Yeah, good. That's just great. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you.
I forgot to. Oh yeah, Marta, go for it. I think you're on mute still.
Okay, now, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. I can. There we go.
So Andrew, nice to meet you. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. And Mark, great questions. I actually I've inspired myself with Mark's questions. So you mentioned about bank transfer automation, right? For example, which is also like, well, data, which is involved. It's not about just if something goes wrong, it's just not about annoying the client,
yeah,
or like, you know, a customer, but it's actually there's like money involved and yes, all that stuff. And you've also mentioned e-commerce. So I just wanted to know if in e-commerce, for example, using automation is more about arranging the shop, or it's also involved in the data, like, you know, referring payments and money and yes, prices. So that's basically my question.
Sure. Yeah. With e-commerce, it's usually two things. It's people with Shopify stores that take the orders and then want everything afterwards automated. And with e-commerce, that tends to be so much. There's invoice, bookkeeping stuff to be done. There's usually like a shipping app or whatever they're using to like dispatch. There's usually Trello cards. I find e-commerce people love Trello. Usually they want their customers to get, you know, update messages when something's shipped and all that. And some of these apps they use do have these bits and pieces built in, but Zapier is like a nice way to tie it all into a process. So it's a lot of post order. And then some people, not necessarily for arranging their stores, but they do use it for inventory management. So some of them are using, you know, apps or even spreadsheets to do inventory management. Instead of doing it in Shopify, they want, you know, some other app to be their source of truth. So they want to use Zapier so that, oh, you know, if my inventory changes in my spreadsheet, make sure it updates in Shopify. Or if I create a new product variant, you know, I'm going to do that in this app. Can that go straight live on my store? So that's the sort of thing that's happening. And yeah, especially with e-commerce, like you say, data, getting it right is important. Like I had a client, they built a Shopify store. Essentially it was give a photo of your pet and they'll put it on a cushion or a t-shirt for you. And they were going to build a unique app for it, but they wanted to do it on Zapier just to you know, test the business. And then suddenly their business went viral, and suddenly they were getting, you know, hundreds of orders an hour, and that was all going through Zapier. And those orders needed to go in Trello, and each line item in the order needed to be its own card in Trello. So that was the first challenge, breaking out the line items in Trello. Different people needed to be added to the Trello cards. Different tags needed to be added to those cards depending on what the item was. Something needed, and files that were uploaded with the order needed to be put in different Google Drives. And that was challenging enough, getting that all right and making sure it all went the right place, and then multiply that by 100 orders an hour. And then making sure that, you know, no order gets dropped, no order gets missed. Because of the volume, Zapier was actually having errors because there was so much data. So we had to build a backup system that would detect an error and rerun that order. And I think by the end of it, that client was using 2.5 million Zapier tasks a month, spending, or I think they were spending between $5,000 and $10,000 a month on Zapier. And then we exported some of the workload to Integromat, and they were using something like 1 million Integromat tasks a month. And then, yeah, finally, after 18 months, they developed a custom system for this. But even when that was done, they couldn't just switch over to that because they couldn't trust that it would work. So it was 2 months of slowly moving volume out of the Zapier setup and moving it to their custom apps. Yeah. Obviously, if Zapier wasn't an option, there's no way they could manually process those 100 orders an hour. The business would have just failed. So that's a good example of it, I think.
Thanks. That's really great. Thank you.
No worries. Oh, there you go.
Following up on some of Mark's questions, Mark asked a lot of the questions I was going to ask. How do you deal with the ongoing maintenance? So there are going to be errors because things will happen that haven't been predicted, you know, the information that isn't quite in the right format or whatever. Do you manage that for your clients, or do you just allow them to monitor those and come back to you if they've got a problem?
Depends what they want. Yeah, I've got some that will say, you know, if I have a problem, I'll message you. I've got others that say, I want you to keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
For that, like I said, first I'll make sure I take some money up front to use. Also in Zapier, there's an app called Zapier Manager, which most people don't know exists there, but you can, one of the triggers on that is you can have a Zap trigger if another Zap has an error. So what I do is in those clients' accounts, I set up a Zap that will trigger on an error and then send me an email if there's an error on their account. So then I see that and I can jump in and fix it. Yeah. And then, yeah, obviously, as well, sometimes, you know, you'll hear like Google Sheets will go down and I'll start getting error messages for all of my clients. So I can quickly send out a blast and say, guys, if you're using Google Sheets, you're probably going to see some Zap errors. Don't worry about it. It's temporary. It will fix itself. It's a bit of a juggle. I wish I had a slightly better system for managing it all, but at the moment, it's a case of just trying to keep up.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Yeah, particularly with the unknowns, you know, you know, someone putting in different format of a number or whatever, all these little things, you know, they can always throw a curveball at you. But thanks for that. That's good. Yeah,
it's to add on that, and there's a problem because when you get an error, you've got to work out, right, is it because Zapier is down? Is it because an app they're connected to is down? Or is it because the data going through the app used to be in one format, but somehow it's slightly changed format and broken every single filter and formatter you painstakingly built for them? Or it might be all free, you know, but sometimes it is.
It can be. Great, thanks.
No worries.
Sure, Martha.
One more question. Yeah, I want to ask, because most of us, I mean, I don't know if most of us, but many of us actually learned about no code past year. And so when was like your first automation, what it was? Like, can you remember like how it started for you?
Yes, I had. So it was back like 2015 now. I had another business matching language teachers with students. And basically it was making some money, but not really that much. I needed to go and do other things and I couldn't obviously afford to hire anybody to run this. So I didn't want to shut it down. I was like, what if I can just, it runs off a spreadsheet and it was a WordPress website. So I was like, I bet I can automate this. It just needs to be sending emails to people, a Google Sheet and a website. And so I Googled around, found Zapier and thought, all right, yeah, okay. And yeah, I just started building Zaps that solved problems for that business. And I think the first complex one I built, I came up with this Zap. I wanted to basically look at a spreadsheet every day. And if for each row, if it was like a certain number of days since the last update I'd had, they should get an email. So I built a Zap that basically looped on itself, checked every single row, checked the day, did some maths, worked out, and then sent them a customized email. And then I went further and there was links in that email. And if they clicked that link, that would trigger another Zap that would do something else. And yeah, and then I was like, okay, this is cool. And then after a couple of years, I was like, oh, you know what, probably some other businesses would want this and might pay for it. So I went on Upwork, signed up. And yeah, I think the next day I'd found a client. So I was like, okay, this is good. And really just grew from there. Like back then, there really wasn't too many people doing Zapier solely doing Zapier and professionally. So it was quite easy to find work. So that was good. I think I had good timing. There's a lot more people doing it now. It would be tougher to get started, but still, I still think there's more demand for it than there is people doing it. And more people are discovering no code and automation. So I think it's going to grow and grow.
Thanks.
Zapier, I've only just caught up with you with the loop in then, Andrew, because that was the first video I saw of yours where you showed how to loop back.
Yeah.
Zapier, I think last week or the week before.
And that was the way you had to do it. And now I must go in and change that video or like update it. But yeah, like that was one of the most asked for features. Yeah, and like I say, yeah, it's a simple thing that also the Integromat has had since it launched. That Zapier hasn't been able to do. And paths obviously was the other thing that for a long time you couldn't do, branching workflows. So yeah, I do find Zapier can be a bit slow sometimes in like catching up with the basic features. For example, it's still not possible to rearrange steps in a workflow or duplicate steps in a workflow, which is really annoying in a lot of times.
Just one question on the interface. So for managing clients, do you tend to always have the clients have their own Zapier account, or do you share Zaps in your account if you're managing them? Because it would be useful to be able to manage multiple clients' accounts within your own account, and I don't think that's possible, is it?
Yeah, so Zapier based, they don't want us reselling essentially. So yeah, Zaps have to be built in the client's account. In terms of access, in an easy way, yeah, it's still a bit of an ache, really. They haven't solved that problem. It's still me logging in between like 5-10 different Zapier accounts a day. They just previewed for the Zapier experts like a system now where we'll be able to authenticate clients' accounts in hours and switch between them, like you would expect to, like a Gmail account. So that should basically solve that problem. But yeah, it's still a bit off. So for now, it's Trello cards with login details for me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Andrew, if you had to do it all over again without a personal brand and you would start today, try and become an automation expert again, what would that route look like?
Oh, interesting. I guess, yeah, Upwork and Fiverr were and still probably are a great way to, not just for automation, but for anybody who's got like a skill in an app or a tool. It's a good place to find work. I guess I would do the same. I found just being out there and being loud and visible and active and talking about Zapier all the time helped in getting people coming to me with Zapier problems. And yeah, I'd probably pick automation again, because I really think, unlike some other no-code tools, automation is so applicable both to no-code projects, but also to businesses, like in a way where it's easy to sell, because you can literally say, I'm going to build you something, I'm going to charge you $500, but it's going to save you $500 of staff salary in the next month. So it's really obvious you should do this right now. I think for people building apps, mobile apps or web apps, it's a little bit harder to sell because it's harder to show the value.
Yeah, thank you. And what are your thoughts on some of the, well, we've kind of spoken about this already, but some of the technical limitations of Zapier? For me personally, I think one of the biggest updates would be something like version history or an improved editor, like copy paste and rearranging and all that. What are your thoughts on these?
I've heard a rumor that copy paste will be coming this year for sure. So that's that. In terms of versioning, a few people have definitely mentioned that. So they know it's what people want. I don't know if there's any progress on it. I think what I find is people maybe get started with Zapier because it's easy to get involved with. But if you're building lots of automations or quite complex automations, like, yeah, the UI can be quite restrictive. And I think at that stage, a lot of people have learned enough of general concepts of automation that they don't find it too difficult to then go to Integromat and start using that. And they get there and they find, wow, it's a lot quicker to build complex workflows here, drag, drop, copy, paste. And then now there's, other niche tools coming out as well. But I think Zapier is always going to be a market leader because they have 24/7 support. They have a huge engineering team.
Integrations, yeah.
Yeah, they're easy to use and people know them. But I think people who get into it naturally progress towards Integromat. It'll be interesting to see, like, Integromat have just been purchased, so they've got a big fat wallet, and Zapier are profitable on no funding. So, they're both pretty well positioned to keep growing.
Right. Final question. What do you think are the fundamental principles of automation?
Oh, that's a good question. I've never thought fundamental principles. I don't know. Would you have any? Now, as you spend a lot of time, checking out all these automation tools, do you have any in mind?
To be honest, I feel like I've spoken with Max about this before, but many of the no-code principles are actually just code principles because it all works on code under the hood. So I think the single responsibility principle is a good one, making sure that one Zap does one thing and using another Zap for another thing, keeping things small. So I personally in Zapier, I try to keep the Zaps relatively small. I don't like having a Zap that's over 20 steps long or has a path in a path in a path in a path.
Agreed.
Try to use a webhook to split them up or keep them somewhat manageable. I think these are they're not literally principles, but these are some of the things that I try to keep in mind. And when documenting, I think documenting right now is really important for automation, because I don't know what I've made in 9 months down the line.
No, agreed. I will say I dropped out of a computer science degree. So although I never learned to code, I retained, they on a computer science degree, they were also teaching you these concepts like, keeping one thing to do one thing, and trying to logically think through a process to make it as simple, and thinking about how you group together functionality. And I think that sort of having a good process orientated mindset is really important for building Zaps. I find some people find it really easy to conceptualize, building a workflow, whereas some people just can't understand what Zapier is doing and how data is moving through.
Well, one of the things, Andrew, that you said that I think is important and that rang with me is about not automating everything. Because people will try and automate everything, and then, like you said, sometimes if it's something that only happens once every 6 months or something, then you spend all that time doing it, and then you forget you've done it, or something changes in the meantime and it runs anyway. And so, I think that's a good point of thinking about what you need to automate.
I dive into some clients' accounts where, it's a mess. There's half-built processes that are affecting other processes because they're pinging off each other. If you're doing it in your business, documentation, that was another thing I was going to say, Luke mentioned, and that's another weakness with Zapier, being able to easily document apps. And I think actually for a lot of no-code tools, maybe documentation has been something that's been forgotten, because it's all about build. But businesses that are going to use these tools actually need to document quite vigorously and have to be able to see that. So either these tools are all going to have to come up with their own system, or whether somebody's going to come out with some cool meta tool to help with solve this documentation problem. But and it's all coming in hand with, people need to do better planning and do, just think more carefully about the stuff they're building. Otherwise you run into problems and technical debt.
Andrew, I just wanted to, can you hear me all right, actually? Is my...
Bit crackly, but just about.
Yeah. Just wanted to wrap up with like a question on beginners. Is there any like common missteps that beginners make, and anything they can do to avoid them when they're just getting started?
I guess, maybe starting to broad, like thinking, okay, I need to automate my whole business. What do I do? Jumping in. I think, trying to just really be careful and methodical, and like sit down, identify the processes of your business and just pick one that's small. Zapier are getting a bit better now with one good thing about their editor, when you drop in now, they pretty much try and just show you Zaps you can just click and use immediately, like pre-built templates and prompts, stuff like that. So, but I think, keep it really simple at the start, and just learn how the platform works. I guess I'm guilty of this, but there's loads of documentation on the Zapier website. There's loads of documentation on the Integromat website. I never read any of it and just dive straight in. But I every so often I will check the documentation and I'll read something and go, wow, I did not know that. And if I'd known that, I would have built that Zap differently. I would have built that Zap differently, and I would have saved time. So I think, there's a lot more resources now, so make use of them.
I appreciate that. That's really great. And just one last question I'll squeeze in from James was, what do you think of Trade.io?
I saw that, and I was going to answer and say I've never used it. The problem is now I get people do email me like, I'm building this tool, or have you tried this tool? And I've not really got the bandwidth. I've checked out NAN a little bit. I've checked out Parabola a little bit. These other tools, maybe one day. But I think that's the other thing as well. I don't think I'm ever going to be an automation expert that does all 12 tools in the space. I'm going to stick to the ones that I've got experience with. But definitely some other people should see an opportunity to become experts in these other programs. So
Thank you.
Luke's saying there's 180 no-code automation tools. Okay, so some of them are going to drop off. I'm sure some of them are just not different enough from other tools, but for sure some of them are going to. There's such a broad automation is so broad that there is definitely tools there that are going to do one specific thing better than the other tools, and people don't really care which tool they're using. They just want to pay to solve a problem that's wasting their time and money. And if you can do it via any tool, then good stuff.
Yeah. Sam, I just saw, yeah, did you have a question, Sam?
Yeah, I did have a question. I was just wondering whether there was enough time.
Go for it.
Yeah, cool.
Cheers, Andrew. Thanks a lot for all the advice. But my question was around portfolios. So like, I'm not in the sort of automation space, but one of the questions I had was, you know, if I build a website or an app, I can show people the apps and websites I've built. Whereas if you've built someone a Zap, it doesn't really lend itself to like show the next client what you've built.
Yeah.
So I was wondering like what your approach to building a portfolio to show other people was.
Yeah, that's a tough one. To be honest, I never did, because I come across the same problem. How can you show people, you know, I guess the closest I've got is that I built some case study pages on our website. And I think I showed you one. Basically, that's how I've done it. Those case studies seem to have worked quite well. Just describe the business, describe the problem, and then just do a flow chart of the literal Zap we built for them. Another thing I found useful, just blogging. There's quite a lot of, you know, articles on the Loohoo blog now and videos on YouTube. And I've sort of experimented between like broader pieces, like general ideas for building automation for e-commerce businesses, down to specific, like this is how to build a Zap that creates a stat bot in Slack. So I think that can be one way if you're trying to stand out, like create content that shows you know how to use the tools and talks about problems that you know other people are solving, and then they're going to see that and think, oh, he knows what he's talking about, I'll get in contact.
Yeah, that makes sense. And did you ever, when you're making that content, did you make a distinction between, okay, these bits are for prospective clients and these are like general educational videos for people who might like want to learn about automation, or was it just solve the problem?
I guess it was solve the problem. I guess the case studies are a bit more geared towards like, yeah, people are going to ask for some case studies when I'm, you know, some people want that in the sales process. So they're more geared to that. I guess the other content is more like educational. I guess I know that 90% of the people will read it and just use it to do it themselves. But 10% of the people will read it and think, I don't really want to do that myself. That sounds too hard, but that person has solved the problem, so I'm going to pay them to do the same thing for me. So it's kind of has a dual purpose there. I mean, it's something I'm still experimenting with. Like, I think I'm going to try some sort of new content, which is going to be, it's going to be walkthroughs, but there's going to be an explicit sort of web form or a buy button that says, you know, want me to do this for you? This will cost you $100. And for that, you will get, you know, a template link, you will get a walkthrough video and a 15-minute call with me to build it out. So I'm going to experiment, see if that, because some people don't think, you know, might not want to get in contact about a project. They might just want to say, oh, $100 to solve that problem, buy now. We'll see how that goes. That might flop, who knows? And I have that Zapier mentoring club, which I set up. The idea there being, you know, if I get a bunch of people in a Slack group who can ask me questions and can ask each other questions and pay considerably less than they would my hourly rate, is that going to be good for me? Is that going to be good for everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, that does sound scalable.
Scalable. And I guess I'm going on this sort of gym membership approach. Some people will use it a lot. Other people will use it a couple of times a month. And some people might just sit and look at it and get value out of it that way, but not, I don't need to spend any time with them.
Got you. Thanks for that answer. A lot to think about there.
Any more questions in the chat I've missed?
I think you're good.
Live build from Scott doing live building. Yeah, I would actually love to do a live build session. I probably will someday. I've just got to think about how I would host that and get an audience, and how, like, that could go quite wrong. That's the problem. So, but I think some sort of thing where people throw me ideas and I try and like live build a Zap. I'm up for it, as long as people wouldn't get mad if I got stuck or couldn't make it happen.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be fine. Yeah, Doc's the guy for that. someone said. But yeah, aware of your time, so don't want to take more of it. But is there any final words before we wrap up, Andrew, that you'd like to share with the group?
No, just great to chat to you all. I think I'll put it in the chat. You all know my email. Really, don't be afraid. Just write to me. If you have an idea or a question, I'm always happy to give a bit of time. And if we end up working together as well, that's always good. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks guys for coming. I really appreciate your time, Andrew. And we will see each other, I'm sure, all on Slack, Twitter, or somewhere else in between. Exactly. But yeah, thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate the session, Andrew. And see you wherever this week.
Yeah, great. See you all soon, I'm sure. Take care, guys. Bye.